That's Chris Watts' mistress, Nichole Kessinger, blowing him kisses and professing her love for him.
I am having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast. I am so out of breath.
The video, recorded just weeks before Watts murdered his wife and 2 daughters, was uncovered by HLN for their series Lies, Crimes, and Video, airing Saturday. Kyle Peltz is the show's producer.
There's photos and videos of them on a secret trip to the Great Sand Dunes while Shanann and Chris's 2 baby girls were away on vacation.
There you go, baby.
That's Watts you hear behind the camera.
You're so damn sexy.
HLN also obtained voicemail messages Nichole Kessinger left for Watts. She giggles like a schoolgirl.
Hi. It's me. I miss your face. I was just calling to say hi.
Watts also took these provocative photos of his 30-year-old co-worker. He stored them in a hidden folder on his smartphone.
He hides this on an app called Secret Calculator. It looks and functions like a regular calculator, but when you enter 4 digits, it's a secret vault. It opens up and it reveals hidden photos and videos.
Watts claims he came clean about the affair to his pregnant wife Shanann the night he killed her and their daughters. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave and dumped his girls in silos of crude oil. The mistress told cops she had no idea he was planning to murder his family.
This shocked me just as much as I think it shocked the rest of the world.
Watts is serving.
Okay. So again, this room is recorded, and video and audio. We introduced ourselves in the lobbies and earlier, so we're just going to do that again real quick. My name's Kevin Kovac. I'm with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and we're assisting the Frederick Police Department with this case involving Chris Watts. And this is Tim Martinez, also an agent at CBI. Sir, if you just introduce yourself.
Dwayne Kessinger. I'm Nicole's father.
Dwayne, what's your birthday?
November 3rd, 1958.
And home address for you, sir?
8801 West 65th Avenue.
Let's see.
And that's Arvada, 8004.
And a cell phone or home phone or where?
720-982-4547.
Thank you. And Nichole, can you just introduce yourself for the recording?
Nichole Kessinger. Do you need all the other stuff?
Yes, please.
I live at 12255 Claude Court, Unit 612, 0656 9605.
Claude Court, is that? I think we determined it was North Glen, right?
Yes.
Do you know your zip code?
80249.
Okay. Can you speak up just a little bit so the recorder? I know you're tired and you're stressed, and we won't be here any longer than we have to be. You've already had a conversation with people before. You came here on your own free will to talk to us. We picked you up at your request and brought you here. You can get up and leave at any time. You don't have to talk to us. If there's a question you don't want to answer, don't answer it. If you don't want to talk anymore, just tell me I want to leave. And I'm kind of in the way of the door, but you're not being interrogated as a criminal suspect. We're here to understand your relationship with Chris and what you know about Chris and his family, and events relating to Chris Watts. And do you know him as Chris or Christopher?
Either one.
Okay. So the phone number that you reached him on, can you tell me what that number was?
I think I deleted that out of my phone too. I just cut him out of my life. It's a 910 number. You guys have it.
No, we gave it to Mark yesterday.
Yeah, I probably have it, but just in case.
I don't have it
If
anymore.
I recited it to you, would you know it?
Just the first 3 numbers.
Okay. But you know it as a 910 number?
Yes, that's what I do know. I mean, that's what
North Carolina or something.
North Carolina. Okay. So let's just start with a timeline of your getting to know Chris, how you guys met, where you met, all those things. And let's just run. And I'm not going to ask you specific questions unless I think it's necessary. I'll let you just tell me your story. I think it's a little bit easier that way. So I just want to know how you met him, where you met him, how long you guys were dating, and those kind of things initially.
Okay. I think I met him sometime in June, probably early June. It might have been May. It was just talking at work. It was pretty casual. And he didn't have a wedding ring on his finger. And every time I talked to him, he didn't tell me that he was in a relationship. He didn't even mention his kids right away either. And then one day he told me that he had 2 kids. I was like, that's pretty cool. And started telling me about his kids.
That sounded like a sarcastic comment.
No, I thought it was kind of cute. I was like, oh, he's a dad. It was like right around Father's Day too. So whenever that is in June.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm not good with holidays.
He told me he had kids, and then it was Father's Day shortly after
Okay.
that. So that's what I do now. And I was like, I thought it was cute. And then he's telling me about him. He's pretty excited about him. And then he mentioned that he did have a significant other. And then he told me that those 2 were in the process of a separation.
Did he mention the children's name or his significant other's name?
I didn't know his significant other's name for a while. And then I think he told me his kids' names pretty quick, but to be honest with you, on an exact date of when that happened, I don't know.
So in May and June, first of all, where do you work?
I work at Anadarko Petroleum Corporation. I'm contracted to Anadarko Petroleum Corporation.
Okay, and you work out of an office setting where?
In Platteville, Colorado.
Okay. And Chris also works out of that location, per se?
Yes. He's in the field, but he comes into the office with his team.
So you work, what is your job responsibility?
I do health, safety, and environment.
Okay, so you work in the office and you take care of health safety for, Anadarko is an oil and gas company, right?
Yes.
So you're doing health safety in the office and Chris works in the field
Yes.
as a, what kind of job does he do?
He's an operator, so I don't know like all of his daily duties, but he's a field operator, so he works with like the oil wells.
So he goes out and does work on those, whatever
Yes.
that work might be, but he comes into the office frequent?
In the
or-
mornings, his team meets in the mornings. They're not all in there every day. Some days, some of them are in there. Some days, other ones are in there. But in the mornings, typically from like 6:15 to probably 7, somewhere around there.
And is that where you met Chris?
Yes.
Okay. So can you just take us through kind of a little bit of the early part of how he courted you or you courted him? I don't know which one happened. How you guys got to know each other?
I guess we just started talking. He actually, so part of my job is to manage the gas monitors that we have. So Anadarko requires all of their field personnel to carry like gas monitor sensors for toxic gases, and it's my job to control the inventory, any issues, anything like that. And we were having some pretty serious like equipment issues, and we had numerous amounts of people coming in my office one day, and he happened to be one of them. And I'd seen him before, like they meet in the lunchroom, and that's where I go put my lunch in the fridge. So I'd seen him, but I didn't ever like talk to him. So that day we just started talking, and then every time I saw him in the hallway after that, and it was always hit or miss, like it wasn't an everyday thing, it was just when I saw him, we just started talking, and we just kind of had a lot in common and just hit it off, so we'd always have, pretty good conversations. And then I don't know, one day he told me that he had kids and started talking about his kids, and then mentioned, yes, that I have a wife, but we're getting separated. I said, okay. And then
When do you think that was?
when he said all that,
So specifically when he told you he was getting separated from his wife, was that within the first couple of weeks that you knew him, or was that later on? You said you met him around May or June.
yeah, it was still in June.
Okay.
It would have been before Father's Day.
So had you guys ever gone out on any kind of
No.
date at that time? You just
No,
were
no.
conversing at work?
Yeah, that's all it was. And then, I don't know, we started hanging out. We hung out. We went to a park. Hung out at a park.
Let's go back real quick. So why did he tell you that he was getting a divorce? Did he ask you out at that time?
No, he didn't. I think he was probably interested in me. And so, he talked to me a couple times via his work phone, and I was like, no. Like, it was still very, like, friendly conversation. But then when I realized, like, this man is interested in me, I'm interested in him, this is personal, so we got away from the Anadarko thing because I really don't want those guys affiliated with any of this. And
So you have a work phone that's specifically...
no, I have one phone that I do both on. He has 2 phones.
Okay, so he had your phone, the 720-656.
That's the only number that I roll with all the time.
Okay,
So he has 2 phones.
all right. One of those owned by Anadarko and
Yes,
one
sir.
personal.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what his Anadarko phone number was? Okay.
It's been so long, and I mean, I'm sure I could like look it up, but I tried to look it up for those guys yesterday, and I couldn't find it.
Okay. We can find it. That's okay. Just wondering if you knew it.
But at that point, we just like took it to his phone because I just felt it was like better that way. And we just continued to talk, and then
Let me go back to the park. Where's the park?
it's like down the street from my house. It's called East Lake Number 3.
Your house
Yes.
in North Glen?
Yes.
And that was in the June time frame.
Yeah, or like the beginning of July. It was like right around my birthday. It's like so sometime at the very end of June or the beginning of July.
Okay. And that's the first meeting you had outside of work.
Yeah.
The basic conversation for a first date?
I mean, we kept it pretty simple, I guess, you know. I don't even remember everything we talked about. We
Sure.
were there for a few hours. But
Understand my... So if I ask about conversation, what I'm looking for, was he talking about his family during any of these meetings? Those are the kind of... I understand, whatever you guys were talking about, relationship, your life, your interests, those things, we don't need to know that. What I'm interested in is knowing is when he brings up his children, when he brings up his wife, when he brings up financial information, when he brings up his home, when he brings up anything that may have been, and it's been a few days, so you've had a chance to reflect on.
The oil field was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that stretches too wide, too empty. Steel tanks rose from the earth like sentinels, unmoving, indifferent. Beneath one of them lay a secret that would take days to uncover and years to fully comprehend. By the time investigators arrived, the worst had already happened. A family had vanished, and the man who claimed to love them most stood at the center of the mystery. First, the story seemed simple. A husband snapped. Family destroyed. A confession secured. Case closed. But 7 years later, the truth no longer sits so neatly. Because Chris Watts didn't stop talking. From prison interviews to letters, from whispered admissions to chilling revisions of his own guilt, his story continued to shift. And buried within those changing confessions was a claim that reignited public outrage and relentless debate. The suggestion that he did not act entirely alone. That someone else knew. That someone else was involved. The name Nichole Kessinger would become inseparable from the case. Not because a court found her guilty, but because unanswered questions refused to disappear. Digital trails, deleted messages, late-night phone calls, internet searches, and carefully timed movements painted a picture that some believe remains incomplete. Investigators cleared her of involvement, yet suspicion lingered in the shadows of what could not be fully recovered. This story is not about declaring guilt where the law did not. It is about examining the gaps, the inconsistencies, the moments where truth fractured under pressure. In this chapter-by-chapter investigation, we will separate evidence from allegation, fact from speculation, and confession from contradiction, because sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in partial truth. If you're drawn to stories that explore deception, unanswered questions, and the darker corners of human behavior, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Shadow of Deceit, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Before the headlines, before the speculation, there was a woman living a life completely separate from the Watts household. Nichole Kessinger was not part of the public story until the murders forced her name into the open. She worked as an environmental contractor, lived independently, and, by most accounts, kept her private life guarded. Friends described her as focused and self-directed, someone who valued control over her surroundings and her future. She was not looking for chaos, at least not openly. Chris Watts entered her life as a man who presented himself as nearly free. He spoke of a failing marriage, of separation already in motion, of a future that felt delayed but inevitable. To Nichole, he was attentive in ways he had not been at home for years. Their relationship unfolded quickly, fueled by secrecy and intensity, existing in the narrow space between late-night calls and stolen hours. It was a connection built in the shadows, away from children's voices and family routines. Meanwhile, Shawn and Watts was fighting to hold her family together. She believed in repair, in communication, in the idea that commitment could survive strain. She was outspoken, driven, and deeply invested in her role as a mother. Her world revolved around her daughters, around plans she still believed were shared. What she didn't know was how far her husband had already drifted, or how deeply another presence had embedded itself into his thinking. The tension between these parallel lives grew quietly but relentlessly. Chris existed in two versions of himself, one bound by responsibility, the other untethered and increasingly resentful of the life he felt trapped in. Financial pressure, emotional withdrawal, and an escalating desire for escape formed the backdrop of his decisions. Investigators would later note how quickly his priorities shifted once the affair began, how his language changed, how his future plans no longer included the family he once centered his identity around. This chapter of the story is not about guilt. It is about proximity, about influence, about how relationships formed in secrecy can distort perception and accelerate choices that might otherwise remain unthinkable. And as the timeline tightened, the line between knowledge and involvement would become the most contested space of all. The warning signs did not arrive all at once. They surfaced in fragments, small enough to be dismissed individually, but together they formed a pattern investigators and analysts would later revisit again and again. Chris Watts' behavior began to change in measurable ways. He lost weight rapidly. He altered his routines. He became emotionally distant at home while growing increasingly consumed by a future that existed only in private conversations and hidden messages. Digital records revealed an escalation that went far beyond a casual affair. Long phone calls stretched late into the night. Internet searches shifted toward apartments, wedding dresses, and life-planning questions that assumed the absence of a family. These were not the actions of a man merely fantasizing. They suggested preparation, intent, and a narrowing focus on escape at any cost. Nichole Kessinger's digital footprint would later draw intense scrutiny. Investigators confirmed searches related to Shawn and Watts long before the murders became public knowledge. Timelines raised eyebrows. Deleted messages left gaps that could never be fully reconstructed. While deletion alone is not proof of wrongdoing, it fueled speculation because it removed context that might have clarified what was known, when it was known, and how deeply conversations may have gone. There were also moments that felt uncomfortably coincidental. Phone pings placing Nichole near the Watts residence on a morning she claimed to be elsewhere. A reluctance to provide complete information immediately. Statements that shifted slightly over time. None of these elements crossed the threshold of criminal evidence, but together they created an atmosphere of unease that still lingers around the case. For Chris, the pressure was building internally. The life he wanted and the life he had were no longer reconcilable in his mind. Investigators would later describe a psychological tunnel vision, where alternatives shrink and the unthinkable begins to feel inevitable. Whether influenced by external validation or internal collapse remains debated, but the red flags were unmistakable in hindsight. This chapter is where certainty begins to erode, where questions multiply instead of resolve. Because sometimes the most important warning signs are not crimes themselves, but indicators of a mind moving steadily towards something irreversible.
We're now confessing to killing his wife Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste.
It came in a jailhouse confession and featured in a Dr. Phil exclusive today right here on News 5. Our Sam Kramer taking a closer look at what we heard today. Sam.
Yeah, guys, well, that confession coming in a 5-hour interview last week with the FBI, CBI, and Frederick Police at a Wisconsin prison, then relayed to lawyers for Shanann's parents. As for why it made the show, Dr. Phil says he wants to clear Shanann's name and honor all of the victims.
Bella walked in and asked, "What are you doing with Mommy?"
She knew something was wrong.
Almost 7 months later, Chris Watts finally confessing to killing his wife Shanann and 2 daughters Bella and Celeste, the crime happening after he admitted to having an affair and wanted a divorce.
And she had said something to the effect of, "Well, you're not going to see the kids again." As a consequence of that conversation, he strangled her to death.
The story shared on Dr. Phil through attorneys for Shanann's parents, a way of debunking Chris's first story that Shanann killed their daughters.
These tapes put to rest any of that kind of speculation, and that Shanann's memory can be put to rest as a loving mother and a caring wife.
And providing some closure for the family.
There's so much of this that happens that we become a little hardened to it and a little immune, and they want people to know this was our daughter, these were our grandchildren, we loved them, they were real people.
They say he wrapped Shanann's body in a sheet and put it in his truck, told his daughters their mom was sick and needed to go to the hospital, driving 45 minutes to an oil field. His rampage wasn't over while preparing to bury Shanann's body.
He walks over and takes Cece's, Celeste's, favorite blanket and smothers her to death.
Their daughter Bella pleading for her life.
At that point, Bella said, "Please, Daddy, do not do to me what you just did to Cece."
Before the same happened to her. 3 life terms and 84 years for those murders. Dr. Phil will air part 2 in an interview with Shanann's parents coming up on Monday.
In the early hours of August 13, 2018, the ordinary quiet of a Colorado neighborhood masked an irreversible act. By the time dawn arrived, an entire family's future had already been erased. What unfolded next would shock a nation, not only for its brutality, but for how methodical and calculated it appeared in retrospect. Chris Watts carried out the murders inside his own home, a place meant to represent safety and routine. Investigators later confirmed that Shanann Watts was killed first, followed by her 2 young daughters. The acts were swift, controlled, and devastatingly intimate. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of an outside struggle, and no indication that anyone else physically entered the scene that morning. What occurred happened within the confines of a family space, driven by a single individual who would later admit responsibility. After the killings, Chris moved with chilling precision. He loaded the bodies into his vehicle under the cover of early morning darkness and drove to an oil site owned by his employer. This location was not random. It was familiar, remote, controlled. The choice alone suggested forethought rather than panic. The disposal of the bodies revealed a disturbing contrast between efficiency and cruelty. Shanann was buried in a shallow grave. The children were placed separately, concealed in crude oil tanks, an act that would later haunt investigators tasked with recovery. The environment was harsh, industrial, and dehumanizing, amplifying the horror of what had already occurred. What makes this chapter particularly unsettling is what did not happen. There was no immediate attempt to flee, no frantic behavior. Instead, Chris returned home and presented himself as a concerned husband and father, participating in interviews and searches as though nothing had changed. At this stage of the case, verified evidence shows no direct participation by any other individual in the physical commission of the crime. The responsibility, by all confirmed accounts, rested solely with Chris Watts. Yet the emotional and psychological forces surrounding him would soon become the subject of intense public debate. This was the point of no return, the moment where private obsession turned into irreversible destruction. In the hours following the murders, the cover-up began to unravel almost as quickly as it was constructed. Chris Watts attempted to continue his routine, reporting to work, responding to messages, and projecting calm. But beneath the surface, the digital and physical evidence was already forming a silent trail, one that investigators would follow step by step. When Shanann and the children were reported missing, law enforcement moved with urgency. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera captured Chris backing his truck into the driveway early that morning, lingering far longer than usual. It was an unremarkable image on its own, but devastating in context. Investigators noted the abnormality immediately. This was not how a man leaving for work typically behaved. Inside the home, there were no signs of a violent struggle, yet there were absences that spoke volumes. Shanann's phone, purse, and medications were left behind. Her car remained in the garage. These details contradicted the narrative of a voluntary disappearance. The house felt staged, not abandoned. Digital forensics deepened the pressure. Phone records, location data, and internet searches began to outline a double life. Investigators uncovered evidence of an ongoing affair, revealing emotional detachment, future planning, and secrecy. These discoveries did not prove accomplice involvement, but they established motive and state of mind. The timeline narrowed. The walls closed in. At the oil site, forensic teams made a grim discovery: disturbed earth, unnatural markers. The recovery confirmed the worst fears and shattered any remaining pretense. Faced with mounting evidence, Chris Watts failed a polygraph test, an investigative tool not admissible in court, but often pivotal in interrogation dynamics. Soon after, the confessions began. They shifted over time, evolving in detail and blame, raising questions that still linger years later. Some claims suggested external influence. Others contradicted known facts. Law enforcement, however, found no verified evidence supporting the involvement of any other person in the commission of the murders. What remained undeniable was this: the investigation exposed not just a crime, but a carefully concealed unraveling, one that technology, persistence, and truth would not allow to stay hidden. The legal reckoning came swiftly, but it carried a weight that would echo for years. If the story made you think, share your perspective in the comments. And if you want more deeply researched, cinematic true crime stories, remember to like this video, subscribe to Shadow of Deceit, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next.
But that said, I think all of us are gratified at the outcome here, primarily for Shanann's family, but also the many investigators and other professionals, as Mr. Rourke said, some who are represented here and many who are not, who have devoted so much time, energy, and frankly emotion into this tragic case. Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shanann and Bella and Celeste, and we're certainly pleased that this seems to be the outcome. So on behalf of the CBI and I think the other organizations and many who were involved in this, our deepest condolences to the Ruzicks and their family and friends. Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer questions, but I will be the first to tell you that I truly appreciate the Ruzicks being present, not only in the state of Colorado, but in this room. I can tell you on behalf of them, they are not prepared, nor do they want to answer questions at this point, and I hope you all will respect that. I will try to answer questions as best I can on their behalf, at least today. So what questions can I answer for you all?
Could the death penalty ever be imposed in the state of Colorado?
I don't know. We have a governor in office right now who, understandably, we have an election going on today. He is term limited. We have a governor who has refused to make a decision as it relates to Nathan Dunlap. I explained that to the Ruzick family, and obviously that gives them some pause when I'm asking them to endure a 4 or 5 year delay prior to a trial. And many more years after that of appeals and post-conviction hearings before that sentence could ever possibly be imposed. So when the question was asked of me by their family, what is the realistic outcome of this particular case as it relates to the death penalty, the best I could tell them is I don't know.
You said that they requested that you not seek the death penalty. How did that affect your process?
I went through the same process I would have had their answer been different. I had in my mind from the day this occurred, the steps in the process that I felt like were due diligence in order to come to this decision. I don't think any elected district attorney ever wants to have to make a decision about whether or not to seek the death penalty as it relates to an individual. But when I have a family who has been so incredibly supportive and so incredibly firm in their belief that the death penalty not be sought, I don't know how I would have said to them, I'm going to do it anyway.
How early into the process was that decision made?
The decision was made about 4 days ago.
How
How was the family and how did the family react when you told them about this decision? I think there were a lot of emotions that went through their mind, and again, they're going to throw something at me if I say something inappropriate. I think that there was a combination of relief, extraordinary sadness that we ever had to have that conversation in the first place. And I can only say that I hope there is a sense of closure. I know that that will never be fully realized because obviously the tragedy that sits before us today is the loss of 4 beautiful lives. And no matter what happens today, no matter what happens at a sentencing hearing down the road, we can't get them back. She said it very, very poignantly to me. She said, he made the choice to take those lives. I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his. And so that's about as firmly as she could have said it to me, and that was very compelling to all of us as we were talking about how to proceed on this case.
Chris Watts first said Shanann actually killed the 2 little girls. What was his story when he changed his mind? And were they killed before Shanann got home?
Carol, I don't know the answer to that question. We talked a lot about whether we would require him to come forward and give us what we believe to be a complete, accurate, and truthful statement. I think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie has been corrected. The spotlight shines directly where it belongs, on him.
What's the status of the autopsy?
Those are still sealed at this point. I need to have a conversation with the coroner's office, with Shanann's family, and the county attorney representing the coroner's office about at what point in time those will become a public record. We are not assuming that the sentencing hearing goes the way we believe that it will and goes forward. We will not be asking those be kept sealed any longer after the sentencing hearing.
When did discussions with the defense begin about the plea deal?
Several weeks ago. I can't tell you the exact date, but it's been several weeks in the making. We had very preliminary discussions prior to visiting the Rusiks in North Carolina.
Was it just a matter of the death penalty to get a guilty plea?
You'd have to ask them. All I can tell you is the discussions that we had with them, and frankly the discussions that Mr. Wren and I had with the Rusik family made it very clear that there was going to be no further concession. I didn't feel like this was a case where it was appropriate to agree to dismiss some counts in exchange for the plea of guilty to others, because we charged him with what we truly believed he had done at the time we filed that complaint, and I was not willing to entertain any further concessions above and beyond removing the death penalty from consideration.
During your investigation, did you ever get a motive from Chris Watts?
Ask me again in 2.5 weeks, or the day after the day of sentencing. I'll be happy to answer that question. At this point, that's getting a little bit too far into the investigation, at least as we sit right now. We believe that we have a partial motive. I'm not sure if it's the entirety of the motive, but I'll be happy to comment on that following the sentencing hearing.
Will Christopher Watts be solitary confinement?
You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Whether or not he's in solitary confinement where he serves his time, whether it be in what DOC facility in the state of Colorado, or if he's one who's transferred to another state, is left to the discretion of the executive director of the Department of Corrections. I don't.
The agreement also required consecutive sentences. Can you talk about the importance of that?
Sure.
Yourself, law enforcement, and the prison.
Absolutely. I think that the plea of guilty to each of those counts, naming those individual victims, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, was an important consideration, but also he deserves a life sentence for each and every act on top of one another. In practicality, it doesn't make a difference in terms of how long he's ultimately going to serve. But what he needs to understand is he will be serving 3 consecutive life sentences plus a sentence for Nico Watts because of the acts that he committed against all 4 of them. It was important that each of those beautiful human beings.
Believe it or not, I will draw the person you